Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts. Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. Yes, it is. Thank you, Stephanie. So a man named Jack was out hiking one day and up in the mountains, and he made the mistake of coming too close to the edge of the trail, and he fell. And as often happens in these jokes, he found a branch and he held on to it. And as he's hanging there by the branch, he looks down and realizes that it's thousands of feet below him, and he will surely die unless something happens. And as often happens in these stories, he begins to call out for help. Help me, someone, please, anyone, help me. Didn't hear anything, and then there was a booming voice that seemed to come from everywhere and said, Jack, I am here. Who is that? I am the Lord. You mean God? You're God? I am, Jack. I see you, and I am here for you. And Jack said, oh, as often happens in these situations, I've been there too. He said, I'll do anything if you get me out of this. I will go back to church. I will tithe. I will do anything. Just please, please get me out of this, God. And God says, Jack, all you need do is let go of the branch. Silence. More silence. And then Jack said, is there anybody else up there? Have you ever experienced that? Like you're asking for like some wisdom or guidance in your spiritual path, something that's going to get you where you need to go, and you get an answer is like, no, that's not what I had in mind. Today, I am giving my favorite sermon, or lesson, or message, whatever you want to call it. When I first felt the call to ministry, actually I first got the call to ministry when I was 15 years old, but I forgot about it for about 25 years, and then, or 20 years. When I felt the call again in my 30s, once I had discovered this teaching, this non-dualistic teaching that says that we have not fallen from grace, but we are a part of the love of God and always have been. We just need to remember who we are. When I first heard this teaching and felt the call to speak it, this is what I wanted to say. I wanted to stand in front of anyone and say, I know who you are. I know who you are. And that's what has brought me into ministry, because we all forget the truth of our spiritual being. So I've titled today's message, Who Do You Think You Are? Because the way that we answer that question determines so much of the quality of our lives. A couple of weeks ago, we finished a two-part series on self-sabotage, and then we talked about the way that self-esteem is limited in its usefulness. Self-esteem is very conditional. If we have good things going on in our lives, we feel good about ourselves. But then when not so good things go on in our lives, we don't feel good. I don't know about you, but my self-esteem is so conditional that it depends upon how my genes fit. As to whether or not I'm a good person and worthy of love, really. That's just how conditional my self-esteem is. So it's not what we want to focus on. But instead, what we talked about was what Dr. Christine Neff calls self-compassion. That we just make room for ourselves to be human. We bring love. The Dalai Lama defines compassion as where love meets pain. And if we could just bring our love to our own pain, self-compassion is healing and transformative. And speaking of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, I was reminded, one of my dear teachers and dear friends, Reverend Dr. Kathy Hearn, she was the spiritual leader for the religious science organization many years, and she had the opportunity to sit in a question and answer, a dialogue session with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and that someone from the group had asked the question, "What do you teach about self-esteem?" And the Dalai Lama just laughed and laughed. And slowly people began to get what it was that he was laughing about. Because in Buddhism, the self is considered an illusion. That the understanding of oneness is so profound and so powerful that anything that would separate us from the one is not real. Powerful. But we are not Buddhist in unity, although we are a close cousin. We share a lot of similar ideas and understanding of oneness and practices of meditation and how important it is. I'm so glad Reverend Robert is here and will be teaching this afternoon the Insight meditation. I got to sit with an Insight group in Dallas for many years. My friend, Brother Chi Sing, many of you met him, who was a student of Thich Nhat Hanh. It was just a powerful experience in my life. But in unity, we actually teach that there is a true self. There is an individualized expression of the oneness of the one that is you and that is me. And the qualities of the divine are in all of its expressions. The metaphor of the ocean and the wave is always helpful for me here to remember that there is this oceanic presence of God's awareness, of consciousness, of love, of light, of power, of beauty, of peace and joy. This is the nature of reality, and each of us is like an individualized wave upon the surface of this infinite ocean. But within each wave are contained the qualities of the ocean. And so those qualities I just mentioned that Thomas Troward said are the 7 main ones for him: life, light, love, power, peace, beauty, and joy. That's what you're supposed to be living. That's what you're supposed to be giving. That's what you're designed to inhabit and to bring to the world, those qualities of God. And that's what we teach in unity. That is who you are. So sometimes we talk about the higher self. Let me just tell you right now, it's false. Oh, it got so quiet. Not really. I'm trying to be light with this. It's true, and it's partial. You see, there's only one of you. I mean, we can't go dividing ourselves into all these different selves, you know. There's only one of us as a pure expression of divine love. But it's helpful in terms of teaching and understanding while we're in these spacesuits that have belly buttons. It's very useful to begin to hold different perspectives about what's going on in this thing called life, eternity and time. And so the higher self is what we use in unity to describe the part of our awareness that knows no separation, that knows its intrinsic connection to all that is. That's the higher self. And that we can begin, as we begin to release those lesser identities, those false identities, we can begin to move into a greater experience of bringing the truth of our nature, which is God's qualities in our own life. We bring it into being in our expression and our experience, in our giving and our receiving. And that's what we're all about. Today I want to talk a little bit about what you are before we get too much more into who you are. A couple of years ago, Cindy Wigglesworth and I had the joy of teaching a class on this wonderful Unity Classic book called What Are You? By Imelda Shanklin. And Imelda says this: the personal is the scene, body, conduct, situation. The impersonal is the unseen, spirit, mind, in revelation. Your intention translates the unseen into the seen and makes the what of life become the who of life. What she's saying is that there is a doorway where the oneness, the power, the presence of God that is all that there is. It's what we teach in Unity. That's what our name means. There is only this power and presence. There is nothing else. And our intention in our individualized expression is the doorway we begin to bring those qualities of God into reality here, from the unseen into form. This is what we teach in Unity. There is the word often used is co-creation, that our intention, our beliefs, our thoughts is what works with the energy of God's creativity to co-create our lives. And I've shared many times from this stage, but the first time I heard that principle, I was at my church in Dallas, and my minister there said, if you want to know what you're thinking, take a look at your life. And I wanted to run screaming from the church because my life was a mess. And I did not like the thought that I had somehow contributed. I did not want to take responsibility for my mess. That'll keep you stuck for years. It did for me. And as we begin to work consciously with this law, as we begin to enter into a different relationship with the co-creation process, I have another friend who describes, rather than co-creation, that's a great word, but he just said, for him, a better description of what we actually do is that we direct the ceaseless flow of divine creative energy. And it is our intention. That's how we do it. That we are the portal, the doorway for God to show up here on earth as we step into more and more of who and what we are. Something often stands in the way, or is that just me? There's another thing going on here. I talked a couple weeks ago about our divine inheritance, which is this principle that we are one with God, and the qualities of God that's who we are. That's what God gives us by mere nature of existence. We also have the inheritance of our family system and what they thought and believed. I don't know about your family, but mine had some interesting beliefs about the way we're supposed to show up in the world and what works and what doesn't work. And those are handed down generation after generation. We also have our biological inheritance, that these bodies evolved in an earlier time, and we sometimes have mismatched evolutionary needs and adaptation to our environment. And so the work of stepping into who we are means that we have to step through or beyond who we think we are. Back to the title today, who do you think you are? And let me tell you this, you've been lied to. Those messages of not enough and inadequacy, of wrongness. Child, what is wrong with you? You ever get that one? You were lied to. There's nothing wrong with you. And you know, parents, I just have to tell you, even if you're awake and alive, that it is a hard thing to guide a child and not crush them, you know? It is a very difficult thing, particularly if they are a spirited or willful child. Because sometimes you do want to crush that little spirit just a little bit. Because we have to, and like the same, you know, we were guided, and our parents did the best they could, really. I remember when I first really got the depth of that teaching, that if people knew better, they'd do better. Whew, that set me free. It is a tough thing. But all of us come into this spiritual teaching with a lot of baggage and a lot of false understanding about who we are and the way life works. And so we begin to practice different things. We study, we work with therapists, we work in some steps. I'm going to tell you about that in a little bit. We do these different things to begin to unwind the tangled mess that is our understanding of reality, so that we can show up as who we truly are, as who God created us to be, and experience life that way. One of the great teachings that came in the 20th century, not exactly Unity or New Thought, but again, a close cousin. I think we're going to be having a workshop on that this summer. It's called The Course in Miracles, A Course in Miracles. Many of you know it, have studied it. In Lesson 110 in the workbook, the practice of the 365 lessons is you do one a day and you just it gives you some instruction on how to be with a spiritual principle or how to be with an idea, some practice to begin to shake apart your wrong thinking, your false beliefs, your error, your fear, and move into some truth. And the lesson for 110 is this: I am as God created me. And from the workbook it says this: if you remain as God created you, appearances cannot replace the truth. Health cannot turn to sickness, nor can death be substitute for life or fear for love. All this has not occurred. If you remain as God created you, you need no thought but just this one, to let redemption come to light the world and free it from the past. In this one thought is all the past undone, the present saved to quietly extend into a timeless future. If you are as God created you, then there has been no separation of your mind and His, no split between your mind and other minds, and only unity within your own mind. If I am as God created me, the healing power of this idea is limitless. Catch this. It is the birthplace of all miracles, the great restorer of truth to the awareness of the world. That's it. That's the completion of our teaching in unity right there. If we just knew who we were, and who you are is exactly who God created you to be. That's it. How? How do we live as we are created to be? Well, I want to say something too about why we love the Bible here. We really, truly do. We are deep students. We try and look beneath the surface of, is it factually true, or did this really happen, to the deep metaphysical and metaphorical meanings where we can place ourselves in these ancient stories and get the energy and the creativity of it working in our own lives. We want to get in it. Not something we just like quote a verse, but that we actually live the principle. In 2 Corinthians, this is one of my favorite passages of Paul. I argue with Paul a lot, but I sure do read him a lot here, don't I? 2 Corinthians 12, 17, and 18. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And verse 18. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into His image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. With unveiled faces, we are being transformed into the image and likeness of our Creator. That's what's occurring here. And we do honor many paths of teaching and understanding, and many of us come from traditional paths. And I don't want to diminish any of the traditional theology if it's gotten you where you need to be. But we must be willing to expand and grow. If God is only a father or a mother, then we must be always only children. If God is only our shepherd, what does that make us? Sheep. Now, there is a time we need that shepherding energy. And so I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying it's part of the story. And if God is only our Savior, then we are forever lost and in need of saving. What I'm offering us today is what was offered to me, is a deeper teaching that all of these things are true. God is Father, Mother. God is Savior. God is our good shepherd. And there is more. And the more is that God is the indwelling Christ, the presence, the mind in us. As that beautiful message, the scripture that was Charles' favorite, the Christ in me, the hope of glory. Christ in you, the hope of truth, of realization, of the right being of reality. We've got to grow beyond the little us, big God. And we've got to find the big God that is within us. And our smallness will begin to fall away. And it's needed now more than ever. Thomas Merton was a Catholic monk. Even the Catholics get it. Come on, y'all. He says it this way, deep mystic, Merton. He says, God utters me like a word containing a partial thought of Him. A word will never be able to comprehend the voice that utters it. But if I am true to the concept that God utters in me, if I am true to the thought of Him that I was meant to embody, I shall be full of His actuality and find Him everywhere in myself and find myself nowhere. I shall be lost in Him, then I shall be saved. And that's the kind of salvation we're teaching in Unity, where our smallness has dissipated and disappeared, and we are saved into the truth of the indwelling Christ's presence. How do we reveal who we are in the world? Here's what I've discovered, that you will reveal the nature of your soul, and you will do it either in joy or in sorrow. Most of us do a little bit of both, I find. This message this morning was not kind of landing and sort of coalescing as they often do. I'll be thinking about these weeks in advance and thinking of stories or scriptures or other teachings from other faiths I want to bring in. And this one, this is my sermon. This is the one that I knew I was called to teach over and over again. I know who you are. You can't hide from me. I know who you are. And today's talk was not really landing. And so I worked on it a little bit last night. I kind of had some points. I need my 3 points or I can't sleep on Saturday night. But I got up at 5:30 this morning. My friend Kathy Hearn also calls that minister's hour, 5 o'clock on Sunday morning. And as I'm putting it together and preparing it, and these different things, Merton shows up, these different things are showing up. What I kept remembering was other Sunday mornings when I was still drinking, when I was still in the throes of alcohol addiction. Now, I've never shared this part of my story. The worst of my addiction was in my mid-20s, and I found New Thought teaching and sobriety through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous the same year. I was 28. Something about those cycles of 7, interesting. But what I haven't really shared about is that 3 years later, I had a relapse in my addiction. And I had been very public about my recovery. And I was singing at a church every Sunday. And for 18 months, I would wake up on Sunday morning sick, hungover. My hands would shake. When I would brush my teeth, the nausea, I didn't know if I was going to throw up or not. I couldn't eat. And I was finding a way to get to the church and sit behind the piano and sing some songs about the light of God that is within me, and I wasn't able to be in it at all. For a year and a half. The bondage, the chains, the weight of what was around me. There was a solution. And I knew it. I had had 3 years of sobriety. I knew what it took. I knew where those rooms with the bad coffee was. I knew where they were. The solution was I needed will and grace. Not the TV show. Although it's pretty funny. David Cohan, the creator of that show, was a student, a truth student, and Martin Buber was an amazing 20th century Jewish theologian. And Martin Buber put forth this idea that in order to get what is ours, in order to experience the truth of what God has for us, we require will and grace. The will to seek it, the grace to receive it. I've been speaking to you about this polarity of the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the directive and the receptive that we must have in order to move forward in spiritual evolution. And I had the will, but I didn't have the grace. Last week, 45 of us from this church sat in circles at the Unity Village campus, and I jokingly said we opened our kimonos to one another. Not literally. We're not going to go that much vulnerability and authenticity, I don't think. We began to get honest, and we shared with each other some of our deepest feelings and experiences. And those of us who were there, we felt the magic. We felt the connection, the transformation. You see, 19 years ago, when I was in that relapse, I was so bound by my shame, and I had kept it secret, and I was unwilling to admit that I was having a problem. And when I did, when I got found out, when I could allow myself to be a human being struggling, the grace covered me. All that I needed was given to me. I know many of you have struggled with addiction. Some of you are in active addiction. Just the stats would tell us that some of you are actively addicted. I'm not going to point any fingers. And maybe it's not addiction, but you're struggling in some area. There's some way, there's some belief in your inadequacy, your inability to fully embody who God has called you to be, and we're all there. And what I discovered last weekend as we sat around and shared our very human and broken hearts, the light got in. If you've been sitting on the periphery of this community, I invite you to take a couple of steps forward. Get to know people, and more importantly, let them get to know you. Take a class, join a group, find a prayer partner. But begin to connect as you are, and that's when the truth of who you are can come forward. I've been saying this a lot, that something's happening here, but it really is. Something really, really is happening here. Maslow, Abraham Maslow, the American psychologist who created the hierarchy of needs, he had a less well-known theory called the Trampoline Effect. And he said this: when something like addiction or a struggle of some kind, an illness, will take us down, if we allow ourselves to be in the will and the grace, we will bounce back higher than we knew. I'll rise up. I'll rise up and do it 1,000 times. I would like you to repeat after me. I am as God created me. No, like you mean it. I am as God created me. Let us declare this truth as often as we can. This is the word of God that sets you free. This is the key that opens the gate of heaven and lets you enter into the peace of God and His eternity. I don't know what you got going on, but I know that it is the path of your evolution and becoming and the revelation of the good of God. Just as those Sunday mornings that were so hard those years ago, that was part of the path to let the light in. But I do know this: whatever you got, that's what we need here. We love you. God bless you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.